What's up, guys? Al Robinson from LaPointe Insurance Agency. Today we're in Cranston, Rhode Island. We're here with the Ferranti team at loanDepot. This team is awesome. I've known these guys for a long time. A lot of the great lenders and realtors that are here. Awesome process to work with. We're actually going to talk to my man today, Justin Maroney. I've known Justin for a long time. We started around the same time in the industry, and we have some of the same views and values when it comes to our process and really the sales piece. So I told Justin today, we're not talking anything about insurance or mortgages. If we do, we're gonna have to put money into like a little, no jar. We're gonna talk about everything today except for what we actually do. So let's go sit down with him and let's get in there.
Al,
what's up, Justin?
Welcome to loanDepot.
Thanks, man. Thanks so much.
Come on in, brother.
We're here at loanDepot with the Ferranti team. My man, Justin Maroney. I've known Justin for a while, right? I mean, I feel like we got into the industry around the same time. We're actually not even going to really talk about mortgages and insurance. I think if we do, we'll put money into that jar there, like it's a swear jar. Really, I want to focus on kind of like the background, your background and, how you got into, I guess, the industry. But more importantly, like the lifestyle, right? I think that's important right now. I think we're at a point where pivoting in a sales process, right? Whether you sell mortgages, insurance, or you sell chairs, right? I think that's huge, right? So I think, and we have a lot of like-minded ideas when it comes to kind of like the processes behind what we do. And we know like the importance of it too. So I appreciate having you today, man. This is gonna be fun.
Yeah,
sure.
Man.
So
definitely an honor having you here.
Thanks,
love
man.
what we've been able to accomplish these past few years,
Yeah.
and the handful of years we've been in the business. Obviously, there's been lots of challenges,
Yeah.
lots of hurdles, lots of
yeah.
things we had to go through, COVID, whatnot.
Yeah.
So to be here today, obviously, getting to chop it up with you and kind of reflect back on everything we've seen since we've been in.
Yeah.
Any useful tips we could give to some of the newbies coming in.
That's huge, yeah.
I just think that'd be some really valuable content.
100%. Fun fact, right? I know this. Most people probably don't. So before you got into sales, what was your, what'd you do?
So I actually did a brief stint in Hollywood back in 2005, before social media really took off and there was such thing as YouTube and Facebook. Really the only platform at the time was MySpace.
Right. Oh man, I miss those days.
Yeah. And everybody had the music as the theme.
Yep.
Good times, man. But, it was very old school when I went out there. It was, still getting auditions from Backstage West and Backstage East and magazines, booking extra work. But it was really awesome, man. It basically opened my eyes to the other side of things in terms of, East Coast, West Coast. I drove out there, so that was an adventure in itself.
That's crazy.
6 days on the road,
Wow.
Probably averaged about 10 hours per day.
Jeez.
But, just open country, seeing the landscape change was really eye-opening.
Yeah.
I highly recommend to anybody.
Right.
To definitely give that a shot. It's well worth it. Interstate 80 was the way. But I basically drove out there. It was basically one of those things where I had a talk with my wife at the time and made a decision that it was time to dream chase a little. So I had always been dancing, acting, rapping, singing since I was a kid. Mom was the artist type. Dad was a musician.
Right.
So naturally, I was going to get some of their traits and
their
skills.
genes.
So entertainment, music, I live for it. So went out to Hollywood, dabbled for a bit. It was awesome. Got to really experience some cool things while I was out there, meet a lot of great people.
Yeah.
But that also translated, kind of into what I'm doing now, fast forward. And it's really one of those things where, being in front of the camera, of course, kind of having to sell myself to the people.
Yeah.
And a lot of it obviously correlates into what I'm doing today.
Right.
So being in front of cameras, building a brand, doing all this stuff. And I never thought I'd have a profession aside from acting that would kind of full circle.
Come back.
And I'd have to come back to that.
Right.
But it is cool to have had that experience and now be here, in front of the camera.
Again, don't fast forward just yet though. So
Yeah.
Hollywood. So can you talk about like what you did? Did you do like maybe not exactly like the movies, but is that something you can talk about? Did you like were you in movies? Like what'd you do?
So I did a lot of extra work while I was there, because the way the movie business works is basically that's the hard way in, right? Is you do extra work, you get a couple SAG vouchers. Once you've acquired a few of them, you can join the Screen Actors Guild. So everybody's kind of on that mission.
Right.
The only backdoor way into Hollywood is basically you get booked for something where you're speaking.
Right.
If I have any speaking lines, a commercial, a movie, and the director wants me there, it's like default into the union because you can't even be on screen speaking unless you're in the union.
Correct.
unless you're doing indie films and such.
Right.
So cool story is basically, while I was there, I did a bunch of extra work. I was involved in a movie called Dirty Deeds, very American Pie-ish.
Okay.
Milo, I'm going to butcher his last name, Milo Ventimiglia or something along those lines. But Zoe Zalando was also in it, the female from Avatar.
Yeah.
Very popular actress nowadays. She's come a long way. So being on set with her when we were just kids.
That's crazy.
Super cool to see how far she's gone with it.
Right.
Is just amazing, man. Even Milo, he went on to do the Rocky movie, Balboa, a bunch of stuff. So being on set with those guys and kind of seeing everything unfold was really cool.
Yeah.
That's the one big thing that I had, involvement in while I was there. But the cool part is it was also filmed and directed by guys from like Smithfield.
Oh, yeah.
So I had no idea of this at the time, but here I am in California, and the movie I get involved in is being directed by people from Rhode Island.
Right.
So super cool. Everything, went to the theater, of course.
Right.
I got the movie ticket and the poster on my wall.
Oh, dude, that's awesome.
Pretty sweet moment. So yeah, it's a cool story and something that I really reflect back on because a lot of, what I was doing then is similar to what now I have to do now. And, with the social media aspect, there's a lot more, obviously, a lot more options to get yourself out there than there was back then.
Oh yeah, we're talking like you said, like Facebook and Instagram and TikTok. I mean, it has to be hard building up your brand without those tools that a lot of these people have today. These influencers have this stuff, and a lot of them go from being an influencer to Hollywood because they say one catchphrase or something, which is crazy. What is a day, right? So you got my interest peaked there. So what does like a day in the life of like set look like, right? So like that film that you were in with Zoe Saldana, right? So like what does a day in the life of that look like?
So it's funny, man, because it's a lot of waiting around.
Yeah.
A lot of people that get out of that business, it's because of the 14, 15, 16-hour days, and a lot of it is just waiting off to the side.
How much of that is waiting, you think?
A lot of it. Probably, could be 70-something% of the time, 80% of the time. You're just waiting for your scene to be called so you can know, hey, you're needed.
Right.
Extras especially, because you're basically off to the sideline, and when they need you, they call the whole group. Is
the waiting around, because you would think, right, like, we try to film as high production videos as we can, right? Which is a whole different level. But I'm saying from Hollywood, right? So like you would think like someone, right, in your role, right, like you have a line, you have to be in a certain spot at a certain time, like you're waiting around because the people that are actually like talking or like, getting their lines out, they're just like not doing it on time. Like what? Like is that what that warrants?
Yeah, it's multiple cuts.
Yeah.
People don't realize how much it takes for you to actually do just one scene.
Right.
You might do 17 takes on that one scene.
That's crazy.
So there's a lot of time going by where people are trying to get their scene right, and you're just off to the side. You might be 4 or 5 scenes down the road.
Right.
So a lot of it is people on the side in lawn chairs. They're eating the catered food off the food service trucks. And,
in the trailer, right?
It's literally just a bunch of people conversating, talking.
Wow.
But funny enough, if you really want to get in and break into the movie business, one of the biggest things is while you're on those sets is to not be that guy that's in the lawn chair kind of slacking off, reading your phone, doing whatever. You want to stay engaged.
Like networking.
Really, exactly.
That's crazy.
Network off to the side, make connections, and it's really just about being available.
Yeah.
When the assistant director is calling for you, it's just being there.
Right.
At the end of each, movie or whatever you do extra work-wise, at the end, it's up to you to basically approach the assistant director and ask for a SAG voucher. Every single Screen Actors Guild member on set is being paid from the SAG voucher.
Yeah.
It basically shows that they're in the union.
Yeah.
What happens is they always have extras usually at the end. So if you're somebody trying to break into the business, your goal is to try to collect at least 3 of those so you can join the union.
Got it.
Now, things might have changed since then. This is going back to 2005.
Yeah, right.
And nowadays, people can get, that same type of notoriety just doing some stuff on YouTube.
Yeah.
And if they're trending and, they go viral, well, then here you go. That's kind of like the another back door into the business nowadays is social media, because you can become a star on your own without
that, right.
But very old school way was basically, that was you earning your keep.
Yeah.
Was going and being on set, and getting enough of those SAG vouchers to then join the union.
Yeah.
So
it's funny too, because maybe not funny, but I heard a stat a few weeks ago where like that industry since COVID has even changed drastically. You talk about, you see the strikes that are happening. Again, you probably know way more about it than I do, but a lot of these people that, these actors, you see them like pick up, the endorsement roles, like Capital One, or, they're talking about like a insurance company or whatever, because like the work's got to keep going, Like, what do you see from COVID now? Like, how much of that has really changed, and impacted those people out there? Like, changed substantially.
Yeah, I mean, COVID definitely had an impact on that business. Hollywood was pretty much locked down. During that time, everybody was kind of filming stuff from their house.
Yeah.
So, and of course, it's funny too because a lot of the actors are really into themselves. Of course, as you would imagine, some of them, they just that's their job, kind of, right? So, a lot of them were having some serious. You saw a lot of the kind of insecurities of Hollywood because during that time when these people were now stuck in their house, the only thing they had was their phones and social media to try to stay relevant and in front of the public. So I think you saw a lot of, kind of the inner workings of some of these celebrities during that time because I feel like a lot of them were just like,
there's no work.
There's no work, and then of course, I'm sure everybody in the general public noticed too with their shows. You're expecting your Game of Thrones to come out and,
it's delayed. Of course.
So production, was kind of halted during that time. But, now I think also it's important what's happened the past few years with, the Me Too movement, everything that's kind of shaken Hollywood up because it really needed it.
Good.
I was only out there for about 8 months. And in that time, Scientologists approached me multiple times. Like, I don't even know how these people knew I was there. So it's like they just really try to get their hooks into you as soon as you get there. And being a 25-something-year-old kid at the time, was very thankful to have the background I had and had been through so many things in my life leading up to that time, because it really just had me able to adapt and kind of navigate that business maybe better than some. Because there's definitely some dark roads you can go down there almost immediately when you get there. The parties, the lifestyle, and you're just getting invited to all these things. So it's pretty wild, man. But I think a lot, if anything, it's changed for the better. And I think the kind of clean sweep that's happening in Hollywood right now is definitely good too, because you need that to be a safer atmosphere for people. There's too many young people, talented young people that go out there looking for these, professionals to take care of them and coach them and mold them. And obviously to have a lot of that dirt that's happening or have been happening the past few years cleaned up is definitely needed.
Those type of personnel over the next 10, 20 years are going to change more. So I guess again, you can now essentially, go viral on TikTok and get picked up by an agent, and now everyone wants a piece of you and can cast you in a movie. You think we're going to see a lot more of those people, in maybe not lead roles, but in roles where, they could be a star without having the acting, maybe again, more than me, right? So maybe not having the acting classes or having the background. They're just kind of an overnight sensation, and now they're in Hollywood, in a lead role.
I think right now, for anybody that's serious about getting into that business, it's definitely easier than it's ever been before because of all the social media stuff. So I just really think anybody that's serious about getting into that business should really just market, you got to market the crap out of yourself, basically. Get all your pages up and running, get headshots done, do whatever you can to basically get your whole acting, headshots, profile, resume together. So then you can it's a lot more easier nowadays, I feel, to get that information to places. You can do a whole entire reel and send it to a director. You don't have to be there live in person anymore to do these auditions. Historically, it's been either live in New York or live in LA if you want to make it in that business. So to now be where you can basically be anywhere, get your information out there, do some auditions, send in a reel of you, doing different languages or whatever it is that, that person specializes in. Getting that information together is far easier than it's ever been before. You might still have to fly out to LA for live auditions or New York, but you could book a lot more business from your couch now than you used to be able to do back in the day, as long as you get that resume and headshots and get your stuff out there to the right place.
I think a lot of places too now, you get these huge, I think Rhode Island especially, you get a huge credit for filming. I only know that because in a prior life, I was able to help support some productions in Rhode Island, before I was at La Pointe. And that's the only really experience I have is helping these actors, actresses, get a certain service they needed. But it was cool because the exposure I had was, I was essentially just giving them this piece of support. It's just and this was a long time ago. You see a side of them, it's just this is crazy. They just expect everything,
it's wild. They definitely get played by a different set of rules in life, but you'll find there's definitely some celebrities out there more grounded than others.
For sure.
Some of them are tough to deal with.
Right.
And some of them are just excellent. They'll coach you on set. They'll give you all kinds of tips.
Yeah.
They'll introduce you to the right people.
That's awesome.
So yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny for me because I didn't really get my big break while I was there, but I did when I came back. So
really?
I basically just joined a couple talent shows,
Nice.
Pro Scouts, and a few others out in like New York, Boston area, and ended up winning one of them. And that's when I actually got offered my first contract to sign with an agency.
Wow.
Of course, at that time, the stipulation was you had to live in LA.
Oh, jeez.
They need you to be available.
Yeah,
for
all
work.
this.
They're going to book you auditions. True agents in LA usually get about 10% of what you make, but they're not making money until they book you.
Right.
So the idea is you got to be there so they can book you work, so it's worth it for everyone.
So you're available at their leisure, essentially. Right.
So, it's funny because at that kind of crossroads in my life, I could have went that route and relocated, but I had a young family at the time, obligations back home. Definitely wasn't something I could just drop everything and go. But to me, it was also, that moment where I realized like, hey, I didn't get to do that, even though I would have loved to, but I had that experience and I technically made it. I got that Willy Wonka ticket.
All right.
Here's your contract. Just sign on the dotted line. We'll bring you out here and we'll make you a star.
That's awesome.
So it's something I always get to look back on and be like, I just dropped everything one day, packed up my stuff, drove out. That's called chasing your dreams, man. You got to do it. If it's something, I always kind of reflect back to a conversation I actually had with an uncle of mine, war veteran, Green Beret, all that stuff, the war hero, and somebody I respected, I had a lot of admiration for growing up. And he always told me, you never want to be years later looking back at life saying, what if?
Yeah.
You don't want to be the person that has a bunch of what if at the end. You want to be able to know that you followed your dreams, chased the things that's important to you. You were genuine. You tried to help people. Just be, an overall good person through life, right? But that you actually don't have a lot of regrets in a what if scenario at the end. So that's what made me kind of chase after that dream to begin with. And having that kind of moment at the end where I made it, even if I didn't get to capitalize, it was still a huge win for me and something I'll always be proud of.
Nice. So one more question, then move on. So do you still have the opportunity to get casted for any roles around here?
So it's definitely something I could.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where this business that I'm in now is definitely the new dream, right?
Yeah.
It's because it's connecting with people, it's being genuine. It's basically all of my superpowers that I get to flex every day. Just being who I am and helping people achieve the biggest thing that they can buy in their life. Sure, it says
home means everything.
Right? So everybody wants a place to call home. So that's why this is, I have the same passion that I had for the craft that I have now.
Nice.
So that's why I don't have a ton of time to go and dabble with the acting stuff because so much of what I'm doing now is very similar, but it's for this. It's for my craft currently. So, it's just a matter of I don't like to take too much attention away from this, and I'm so passionate about what I do. I have trouble sleeping at night because I'm just constantly thinking of ideas, how to be better, how to level up, how to do better by these people. And it's just constant.
Yeah.
So
that's sales, baby.
That kind of like obsession and passion for what you do, it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, I just don't have time to really dedicate to that. If I wanted to though, it'd be much easier now than it was back when. So could be a side hustle in the future, we'll see, but nothing that's going to take away from obviously, what I'm doing.
Okay, awesome. Stint in Hollywood. How do you go from that to sales?
So I came back, and once that was kind of squashed, and I kind of started moving on and focusing on family and career building. I actually walked into a car dealership and was there for. I love cars. It's one of my passions, right? So muscle cars, sports cars, all of it. And Inskip has a lot of cool cars.
Sure.
So I walked in there as a young kid and was there for a detail job, actually cleaning the cars because I just wanted to be inside them.
Right.
They were like, you're way too good with people. Just you crushed this interview. Like, what are you doing? Like, why don't you just come be a salesman? Of course, I was blown away at the time. I'm like,
sign me up.
This really just happened, So, and this is during a time, again, early 2005, 6 era. There was one computer in the showroom. So just think about that.
What a time to be alive, man.
One salesman in the showroom at the time with a computer. The rest of us were just walking walk-in traffic off the street. So you're like fighting over every person that walks.
Let me get in there.
Yeah. Then the seniority thing comes into play. It was actually pretty wild.
That's wild.
But I got to drive a lot of cool cars. I got to learn how to drive stick shift on like a cherry red BMW M3.
Oh my gosh.
Been a Beamer guy ever since because those things just hug the road so smooth. But it was a cool job, and basically that's where I got to flex and realize that, hey, I'm pretty good with people, and I'm not ever going to be that sharky sales guy. So the car sales thing eventually kind of grew on me because it is kind of that style business. You're selling a product to somebody that you probably purchased much cheaper, and then making them believe, something that's not, necessarily a deal. So it's just, I'm not that guy. Yeah. I'm too honest of a person, was raised by my mom, single mom, type of family. So it's not something where I can have any type of profession where I'm being dishonest with people, or even slightly. Yeah. So it's just not in my DNA. So car sales eventually kind of fizzled out, and then they started bulldozing the place to make it into the masterpiece it is now. Right. So that didn't, help with sales either when sand mountains everywhere. So I moved on from that, but that was my first real test the waters in sales. Like
customer facing.
Right. Dressing up, behind a keyboard.
Big boy job.
Behind a desk, all that stuff. So, but I did very well there. That transitioned into years later, a few other sales jobs. I sold Kirby vacuum cleaners, unfortunately.
We talked about that before, right?
2008 recession.
And half of our people listening probably don't even know what a Kirby vacuum is. I happen to do no, because my parents had one growing up. But it's funny you told me that, a few weeks ago, and I'm just like, you got to talk about that, because that's just,
It's like a $2,000 vacuum,
right.
Which is hilarious. Right. And then people, to make it take it even a step further, people finance these things. Right. So you're financing a vacuum.
Right.
It's absolutely bonkers, but believe it or not, it's like the Mercedes of vacuums. I own one myself. I still have it from then. So
I think too, their sales piece was they offered a lifetime warranty. On the parts, I want to say.
And it's like a Mercedes.
Maybe not now, but back in the day, I think they had a lifetime on.
And they service them.
Right, that was the sell.
Metal,
right.
It
was huge.
It's like 80 pounds, man.
Yeah, I think it was huge.
They got the Dysons and everything.
I remember being 3 or 4 or 5 years old, and I'm just trying to pick this thing up, and I'm like, this thing weighs more than me right now. There's no way. That's funny.
It's wild, man. And just... the way the product is sold. Right. So it's basically you're advertising free carpet cleaners.
Right.
Imagine
door to door.
Imagine some of the scenarios you walk into. Just rugs that are just destroyed, and you're basically there to clean that mess. Right. So that that's your sell, right? And I sold 30 in a month.
Wow.
So definitely opened my eyes to pretty much anything you give me, I'm going to master the product. I'm going to study the product. And that's really what sales is about. Yeah. Know your product, know your audience, know how to connect the two. And that's what kind of, I've just been able to master over time is being in these different sales roles, is realizing that if I believe in the product, if I honestly myself believe that what I'm selling is a good product, I can sell it to anyone. Yeah. And it doesn't feel, dishonest, because I'm literally giving stats, I'm giving facts on why this product is what it is, why I believe in it, and why I believe you should have it. Sure. And it just comes off as more genuine and more real. Right. And at the end of the day, 2025, it's all about realness.
Sales is a lifestyle. That's in my opinion, but I think sales is really a lifestyle. And I think once you're in it, and if you're in it for a long time, it just becomes more and more of a lifestyle. Some people don't get it, my wife is in medical, she never gets sales, and that's fine, because I'm not the medical guy, she's the medical person. I could never do medical. That's some people's cup of tea, not mine, But it's definitely a lifestyle, and I think it's more so when you get consumed in, having to sell yourself. It's funny how that transitions to everything else in your life. I think of it I have a son that's 3.5. I'm trying to sell myself to him to do the right thing, or to help him learn to do the right thing, And that's what, you mentioned, keeping you up in it. That's what keeps you up in it. Is how can I sell myself in a way that doesn't come off like, you're a sleazy salesperson or whatever the case is. But I think it's a lifestyle for sure, man. It's just it consumes you to the point where you're always if you think about it, there's so many sales roles that people don't even think about, but they're all over the place. You go to Panera Bread, they're trying to upsell you to buy another cookie. That's a sales role. Yep. So it's just funny. I think it's a skill that can't really be taught. You have to have the experience. And And I think you have to be able to put 100% into it 100% of the time. You got to be all in with whether you're selling Kirby vacuums or mortgages or insurance. Like, you got to be all in. Otherwise, you're never going to be successful,
Amen. And it's funny too, because one of the first things that I actually kind of picked up on early on in my career that made me, feel better about what I was doing is, simply just that everything is sales. This was mentioned to me a long time ago.
Yeah.
It's stuck with me ever since.
Yeah.
Everything we do is sales.
Right.
When you talk to somebody in the hallway and you ask them how their day is,
right.
You're selling yourself
You're
on
selling
being a kind person,
correct.
A caring person. Yeah. Everything we do, even if subconsciously we don't realize it, we're selling. We're selling ourselves. We're selling to somebody why we dress a certain way, why we act a certain way. Everything is basically sales.
Right.
So in the grand scheme of things, if you think about it that way, then you don't have to ever feel like, I'm not, what I'm doing is wrong. I'm making too much money doing this or whatever the, typical sales things, it's too sharky, it's too this, it's too that. Yeah. I've never put myself into that box or felt that way because I've always kept it real. I've always been genuine with people, even if it was at the cost of me maybe losing business, because I'm just building a brand since day one. That is, I'm going to be real with you. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to take you through whatever, we need to go through, and I'm going to be right there holding your hand, and we're going to go through this together so we can come out on the other side. Yeah. And whatever product it is that you just purchased, I want you to be happy with that. So that's going to lead to future business. That's going to lead to referrals. So it's all about just putting out a good product, and I am part of that product, so it's, it's really wild. But once I started looking at things like that, then I could really just go and sell anything and just know that it's just, as long as I believe in the product and I know, what I'm doing is right, all's going to be okay.
No. When you're in a sales role, do you think that you get to a point, right, where you kind of imagine it like you're making too much money, where you transition from like that mentality to, hey, you know what, like, I don't need to like make ABC, but like, I want to have a bigger impact in this avenue, or that avenue. Do you think like people hit that wall, and more importantly, like, when do you think something like that happens,
Yeah, it's a great question, man. It's definitely growing pains related, you know? So, and it's something that I've already kind of started to deal with, coming from my last profession, which was very relatable to this business. I worked for a title company for, almost a decade. And in that time, bounced around various different roles, trying to climb that ladder, which had its limitations. It's more, ops related. So there's only so high you could climb. But in that time, I learned a bunch, worked a bunch of different positions, and actually became the person that pretty much was training everybody that came in later in my career. So, and I just got so good at all different roles. It was like, put him with Justin, let him show them the ropes. Doesn't matter which position they're in, he'll get you stuff. So, and it wasn't like I got paid extra, did anything for this. This is just something that I was good at naturally, so they just had me do this. But it also opened my eyes to like, hey, I can run a team. I had a 6-person team at one time, working like a well-oiled machine. So not only can I master a skill and be good at it and do this, but then I really enjoy the part of sharing that with the people behind me, kind of grabbing them and bringing them up to my level. Whereas, there's some guys don't like to share the secrets, or they don't, I've never been that way. It's all about level myself up, and then what can I do to bring the people that want to be where I am? How do I get them to my level? Yeah,
and you can't teach that, man. Like, same thing. I managed a team for a while. Most people know my story, and it's like, it's tough because you have to be good at sales either way. You have to know if you have a team where you're selling a product, you have to believe in that product, and then get people underneath you to believe in that product, but more importantly, to believe in you. And it's a tough balance. It's a balancing act. I think the biggest thing I always learned was like, you have to, when you manage a huge team, whether it's 5 people or 40 people, like, you have to understand like everyone's personality, like what motivates, John Smith over Jane Doe. Like, it might not be money for both of them. It might be like, having the weekends off, or, doing a half a day on a Friday, whatever. But it's finding that out, and a lot of that is like asking the tough question, like what motivates you to be better, do better. And you'll gain respect from people 100% of the time when you figure that out. You see it where people get put in these, people management roles, and it's like, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this, and you think what motivates the people, but that you're wrong.
Everybody's
you're wrong, and then you got somebody that's maybe been with a company for a long time that is just not happy or just leaves, and it's like you mentioned earlier, woulda, coulda, shoulda. Like, why did this person leave? You know, what could I have done better? You know, and that was always my big thing, was like, I'm gonna find out what motivates you, and I'm gonna work my butt off to do that for you. Right. But a lot of the time is you gotta like know how to motivate yourself as well. It's a two-part equation, you know? It's hard. It's a tough balance. And it's just nowadays too, man, with like, you know, these Gen Z, what are we, X, Z, you know, because they're motivated way differently, you know, than 15, 20 years ago. But I think the sooner you find that out with what motivates someone, you're going to gain trust from that person right away. They're going to understand that, you know, that you want them to be there so you can help them, you know?
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the biggest skills you can have in sales, listen. Yeah, listen. You know, it's one of the first things.
It's the 80-20 rule, right?
Yeah,
ever heard that?
It's, you know, because people will give you their story. Yeah. You know, it's just you have to give them a chance to. You know, a lot of sales, when you get into a new business anyway, or a new product that you're selling, is testing out that product knowledge, right? You want it so bad to know that you know what you're talking about. So you want to flex on people. Right. But the problem is that's what happens, is you flex too much on people, even the people that you feel are better off than you, maybe they have a higher profession than you, whatever it is that you feel are just, you know, a level smarter, whatever. You can easily offend those people by just talking too much about the product that you're so proud about knowing, because they simply don't know as much as you. So now you're, you know, putting yourself in a situation where it's like a, you know, they're less than you almost. So you can intimidate people that way. You don't ever want to do that. My biggest thing has always been just, you know, listen, right? You want to ask the questions that are going to get you to the place to where you can help them the best, you know? So find out what the pain points are, find out exactly what's motivating them to buy a home right now, or, you know, whatever it is that you're selling. So you can really kind of deliver what they're looking for. At the end of the day, it's not, here's what I got, pick your option. You know, this isn't a restaurant, this isn't a menu. I'll present loan options at times. Like we definitely have a menu of options. But at the same time, it's really just kind of figuring out what that person's looking for. You know, what's the motivating factor? Where's that emotion attached to that's making them make this move right now? And then just doing everything in your power to connect with that, you know? And it's funny because to better answer your question from earlier, you know, the money side of thing, kind of one of the things you see happen in our business over time is, you know, there is such thing as almost too successful, right? Because what will end up happening is now you surround yourself with, you know, you're scaling, you're building a 5 to 7 person team. But now what happens is you have a situation where clients are kind of feeling like a hot potato.
Yeah, they get passed around.
They're just getting passed around, right? So it's like, who's my loan officer? Who's this? Who's that? You know? Obviously with growing, you know, in any business, you're going to have to scale eventually, get more staff, more people. But I think it's very important to stay the face of things.
100%.
I am the face of my operation, and I'll always pride myself in that. No matter how big I grow, no matter how large I get, you're always going to know who I am. You're always going to understand that I'm the one leading that team of people.
You're the quarterback.
To success. I'm the quarterback. Amen. So, and it's very important that the clients know that. So, you know, that's another piece of everything in terms of the money side of things. And, you know, your question is, can you make too much, or, you know, how does that have an impact on things? You know, obviously I'm in the business to be successful, and I want to grow and do things for my family that I've never done before. But the cool part is I get to do that helping other people win, getting them into houses. And, you know, really at the end of the day, I very much look forward to scaling and growing my team personally. But when that time comes, you know, it's also going to be super important to me that I stay the face. You know?
So that'll be a good kind of way to shift gears, right? So we talked about pivot. So I think we talked about, without bringing up our industries, right? We haven't added any money to the swear jar. We're pretty good. So I think we're at a point where in the industry we need to pivot a little bit, right? Again, whether you're on the mortgage side, whether you're a realtor, whether you're an insurance agent, like our market is changing. And it has been changing really since COVID, right? I mean, what do you think is like the first step when you have to pivot? Like, what do you think is the first step that you should do to make sure you're pivoting in the right direction, you know?
It's a great question. You know, I have this conversation with my son when he was younger. I used to make jokes all the time, anytime something bad happened in school or whatever, that life is like a washing machine, right? Because it cycles. So for me personally, it's with my background, where I came from, having moved, you know, 18 plus times as a child, everything was adapt and change and chameleon, you know, be like a chameleon. No matter where I was, you know, who I'm dealing with, people, what walk of life they come from. My background and my childhood, if it taught me anything, it was basically how to adapt and how to, kind of fit into those situations as best I could to be able to feel that comfort zone, whatever, and kind of go on with my life, right? So, yeah, I think obviously you have to, look at what type of industry you're in, right? See where that business is going. What's the future look like? How is AI going to affect that? Some of the new technologies and things coming in that could potentially take away some of those jobs.
Right.
I think it's very important to know what career you're getting into and where the future of that career is going. At least have an idea 5-10 years down the road, like what's it going to look like, to really know if it's worth it to even dive in and go crazy on that career. But that's, kind of pinpointing exactly what kind of future the career you're chasing has is I think one important piece. And the other is just being 100% bought into, if that's what you want to do and that's your passion, you just have to be relentless with it. You just have to go after it and chase it every single day. If that means working 6 days, 7 days, there's a lot of these fake fluencers out there these days. Everybody's wake up at 3 a.m. 2 hours of sleep.
I don't think so.
Listen, all that stuff to me is trash. You need 7-8 hours of sleep a night to function and be healthy and live a long life. So I'm not going to be the guy that's sitting here bragging about waking up every day at 3 o'clock in the morning. Health is important. Yes, all of that stuff is important. Having an early start to your day, all of that stuff is super important. But there's so much distraction and nonsense being shared all over media these days. It's so easy for the younger generation to get distracted and not really know or look for like the easy way out, with all these different platforms and stuff and people making money kind of doing nonsense, type stuff. It's very easy to be like, why do I want a job? Why wouldn't I just be a podcaster?
Well, it's also like scary too, because like the whole TikTok thing that happened a few weeks ago, it's like people were like freaking out, and it's like, we get it. Like you're monetized from TikTok, but like, did you just not have like a backup plan?
Did you not have a backup plan? Right.
And then again, but I think if you're freaking out over something like that, like my response would be like, well, listen, like you sold yourself on this platform. Why can't you just do it somewhere else? Or use use those skills that you've acquired over the years in TikTok to like, go on your own, make your own, So yeah, I do. You're right. I think the platforms are very important in how it's portrayed. But yeah, I mean,
but have a skill, do something, like the trick.
And not to say that, not to say like it's tough getting on camera, let's be honest. Like, being in Hollywood, like that's not for everyone, and it's tough, it's tough to like I do it all the time. Like I put content on, I'm like, crap, like, why did I say that? Like, why did I make that face? Like, I'm like, it can like keep you up at night, like analyzing yourself, But
I'm an old worst enemy with that stuff,
man.
I'll take 3 hours if I'm doing something my
and then you trash the whole thing. It's like a waste, but that's how you learn. That's how you learn. You're a big shit, but that's how you learn, And it's funny to me to see that stuff, and it's like you pivot, right? Like, all right, your platform that you've showcased yourself for the past couple of years, few years, whatever, is going down. Like, you've built some skills up. Like, take that somewhere else. Apply yourself.
YouTube, definitely other platforms. And that's the whole thing. When it comes to pivoting, or you have something shift or change in the career, and you kind of need to take things in a different direction. Just figure out who you want to be. But one of the biggest things I learned early on in my career, and it's something I remind myself often, and this can really go for any career, is know your audience.
100%.
And you have to figure out who that audience is and speak directly to that audience. Because one of the biggest problems people make nowadays is they'll speak to everyone. And if you speak to everyone, you speak to no one. You know what I mean? So you really got to pinpoint who that person is, who that audience is you're trying to target. Most anybody that's making money on socials these days has realized that. They've found their audience, they have their target, and they know how to market to them people and cater to them people to get their business growing. But I think it's also very important these days that people look into, like you said, having a backup plan. If this doesn't work out, how can I use these same skills and translate them somewhere else and, have equal or, success, That's definitely something that I think everybody should have these days, is at least have a plan B. At least if that doesn't work out, or if this site gets shut down, obviously have another plan and use those skills. The pivoting part is basically taking everything that you've learned up into that point and how you can translate it into a new field, and how, that's really where that adapt comes into play.
Sure. So one of the things that I wanted to bring up is, I guess we'll call this segment, hopefully it's not like trademark or anything, flop or bop, right? When it comes to sales. So just some kind of key points that I think are important, but I also kind of like wanted your take on them, right? So you hear like these, cliche, acronyms that in the industry, really any sales job, right? So the first one, fake it till you make it. A hot topic right now is imposter syndrome, which if you don't know what that is, essentially it is when you feel like you're in a spot where you don't belong. I guess it could go both ways too. So you could be a high performer in a role where you don't feel like you belong there, or you could be, an average performer in a role where you feel like you don't belong there because it's too high performing. So that's a hot topic. I feel like I've heard that a lot lately. So fake it till you make it. Is that a flop or a bop?
I'm gonna say that's a bop, and it's solely because you do have to do that in sales or in a business where you're selling a product of some kind. You do have to fake it till you make it, right? Because you have to make people believe in you and what you're selling. So, but there's also like a limit. Like, 10 years in, you can't still be faking it till you make it.
Right.
There comes a point when you're expected to take that success to the next level and actually be at the level that people perceive you to be. So, you can only get away with that for so long. But it's great when you're first starting out in this profession because, you need to obviously establish yourself and build your brand, and having confidence in yourself and the product you're selling is key. So I feel like you do have to, because you don't really believe in the product that much at first. You don't even maybe know everything about what you're selling, but you have to, of course, still portray that. So, it's definitely something where it does come into play, especially early.
I think fake it till you make it, for me, I think it can kind of go both ways, right? It can be a flop or a bop. I think, any sales role, no matter what you're selling, the first year, you're the professional. Again, you're selling Kirby vacuums. You know every part on that Kirby. You know every warranty. You know all, how the cord wraps up in the best way. Like, you may have looked at this thing last night and today's your first day on the job, but you're selling the crap out of that thing, right? That goes for any sales role. Yeah, you can get to a point, I think, a lot of people do, where they are comfortable, maybe stagnant's not the best word, but maybe they're just not being challenged, or, they like the sales aspect, and they're okay at it, but they want to take their talents to the next level. Maybe that is teaching a team, bringing someone underneath you that you can teach them to be, the next Justin, or next Al, whatever, so that can kind of go both ways, but I do think everyone just puts on, in sales, you put on that mask for the first couple years because you might not like it. You might get into an industry where you're like, oh, yeah, I'll try it, and the mask goes on for a couple years, and you're like, 2 years in, this is just not for me, But I think it can go both ways. So next one, right? Dress for your success. I'll go first on this one, right? It's funny, right? So I used to always wear a suit and tie 6-7 days a week. Nothing wrong with that. You get into this industry, I'll never forget, I showed up for my interview, suit and tie, my interviewer was like, you can wear that, it's great, but you gotta dress for your audience, You're gonna show up to a place and a guy or girl might say, you're just overdressed, and they might be intimidated by that. And that never really clicked with me, because, on the real estate side, this is kind of what I wear every day, You maybe not so much, or whatever, there's nothing wrong with that, but some people might not like the suit and tie, and that has come back to bite me. I've sat down with people and they're like, you're I'm in a suit and tie, you're in a hoodie, crap, I messed up. But it's also going the other way, where you show up in a hoodie and someone's like, dude, what are you doing? I was somewhere a few weeks ago, and they had asked what I was actually with my son. We were out, and someone had asked what I do, and I'm like, oh, I'm an insurance agent. They're like, oh, dressed like that? And I had joggers on. It was a Saturday, but I'm like, well, no, it's Saturday with my son and my wife, but if I have to put in a suit, I will, So your take on that?
I say it's definitely it can go both ways, like you said. Definitely, but I feel like the dress to impress thing is super important, right? So it definitely depends on what type of business you're in and what exactly you do. Obviously, there's not always a need for that, but if you're in a business profession where you're going to be coming in contact with people and you're trying to gain their trust, then obviously that's where I think that stuff comes into play. In an office setting, or if I'm going out to an event, or those situations definitely call for the dress, or if I just want people to take me serious. When I was an actor and I was auditioning, I didn't go to auditions in t-shirts and jeans. I usually showed up dressed. I wanted people to see me at my best, so they knew, hey, that's what he can do.
Right.
You know, this guy cleans up well, whatever.
That's a good point. Yeah.
You know, so I wanted, but it's not always going to come into play like that.
Right.
And today's a perfect example.
Right.
I already knew the swag,
the vibe.
you know? So obviously I wasn't going to suit and tie it today and all that stuff. You know, so it's all about the setting, definitely the circumstance, the situation, you know, what warrants what, right? But at the end of the day, is it meaningful and still a thing? Yes, because job interviews, business settings, client interactions, events, you still want to, you know, look your best. It's just one of those things. You get more respect. People believe and trust in you more as well. And I think that's, on my profession anyway, it's the trust part's huge. Yeah. So I don't want somebody, I'm not showing up to open houses. Right. And you know, doing things with clients dressed like this, of course. But, you know, it's also important, like you said, for people to see kind of the realness. Yeah. If they stop in and see me on a Saturday, they might see me like I'm here by myself, you know. It's so situational totally, but still definitely something I think people should do.
In Hollywood, right? This is off subject, right? But behind the curtain, right? Did you ever see like high profile celebrities like show up to an audition just wearing like sweat? Like, is that something that like time, is that And all like, do they would get casted? Or like, again, like an A-list celebrity is, you know, I don't know, Robert Downey Jr. I guess, right? Like if he shows up for like, you know, Iron Man 5, I mean, pretty good chance he's going to get it because he has the rapport built already.
Exactly.
So he can show up in like a t-shirt.
Exactly.
Yeah, all right.
Celebs get away with it.
Yeah.
They don't have to.
It's where you are, though. It's your level of success. Yeah, right.
A-lister, Will Smith, you know, the guy can show up in shorts.
Right.
You know, somebody that's just breaking into the business. They're obviously not going to have that same, you know, that same thing. And it's funny too, because it all kind of correlates to how successful, you know, they are. Not just, you know, status, but obviously finance, all that stuff. Because you will find with most millionaires, billionaires out in Hollywood, the ones that really are set, you know, they don't care about brands. Brands mean nothing. They'll show up in Hanes t-shirts and some, you know, look at Kanye. Stag outfits and stuff. I mean, just ridiculous stuff. But that's when you get to that level, none of that stuff
It doesn't matter. Cool. That's so funny. All right, cool. Next one. Your job is to educate, not sell. I'll let you start with that one.
I'd say that's going to be a bop. That's definitely something that should be in there. Education is such a huge part of anything you sell. And I think really getting that message to the people that you're selling to, that you not only know the product that you're selling, but that you could guide them on any of the questions or problems they might have with that product is super important. So you definitely have to believe in what it is that you're, you know, selling in sales, but it's also educating. So much of what I do is education. Whether it be get a message out to somebody who thought they needed $20,000 saved, or maybe there's a new program out to help people with down payment or credit score improvements. So much of what I do on a day-to-day is education based. Is just getting people that information so they can now level up and move forward with their goals and plans.
For me, that can probably go both ways. I think, you know, we're in a very similar industry, right? I think the one thing that I'm asking a lot of people more is, you know, what's more important to you? Is it service or is it the price tag? Because the reality behind it is, like, some people just want to save a buck. And that's no direction on my process, but there are some times when, like, you know, it's, hey, listen, I don't care about A, B, C, D. Don't even talk about it. What's the bottom line? You know. Again, I'm going to take it as a bop here because I think it's important, because like I have also like talked people off the edge of, like, you know, going with something that's like lower priced, you know, but for very minimal more, here's how much more you get. And that's where the education begins. You know, because listen, like, you know, for the cup of, you know, the price of one cup of coffee, like, here's what you could get more. Like, is that more important to you? It may not be, you know? So it can go both ways. I think it's a bop for sure. I think you have to definitely know who you're talking to, right? And again, just find out what's important, you know, what's important to that, you know? So, all right, cool. We'll do one more. This is the big one, right? I hear this all the time. To be in a sales role, you have to be an extrovert, right? Is that a flop or a bop?
That's a great question, because for me, I'm going to 100% say that's a bop, because it can go both ways. But here's the thing. Extroverts, they kind of do well with anyone, right? Introverts, they do well with other introverts usually.
Right.
People that are kind of like in that same, kind of homebody,
Right.
whatever.
Behind the scenes.
Well, guess what? There's just like there's a ton of extroverts out there waiting for somebody equally as extrovert to kind of grab their attention and get their energy, match that energy, and do good business together. There's that introverted person that needs somebody that's a little bit more introverted. Maybe they need, I might be too aggressive for that person.
Yeah.
I might come off as too pushy or, whatever. So they need somebody like them. So that's why I think it's important that both of those, you'll find in this business that there's salespeople that go both ways.
Yeah.
You don't have to be extrovert to be good at sales. There's people that are sitting home in their pajamas today, making more money than me, that are basically just crushing it with a whole audience of people that they just adapt to because they needed an introvert.
Right.
They needed somebody that would go a little slower, maybe take more time, maybe, I don't really know how to explain it other than they need each other, right? Just like the extrovert needs the extrovert to kind of feel that same energy.
Right.
That introverted person is going to connect probably with somebody that's a little bit more introverted.
Yeah. I think for me, it's a bop. I think, in sales, right, you have somebody that needs to make a decision, buying, selling, whatever. You have to have that person that can talk this individual on or off the edge, right? An introvert's not going to do that, right? To some capacity. The extrovert is going to say, listen, here's what I think is your best option based on, A, B, C, D,
Right.
whatever. Yeah, you're right. There are people out there that aren't customer facing that are crushing it in some type of role, making millions. Great. But I think you have to be able to, again, it's sales. You're selling yourself something. You have to be the one to move the decision, because at some point, whatever you're selling, there's a decision to be made. It's either yes or no. As someone that's an extrovert, it's your job to find that out. If it's a no, great, we move on. If it's a yes, all right, move forward. Here's the next steps. So yeah, I think it's important. You have to know where you stand in the transaction, right? But if you're an extrovert, you're the one that needs to help someone decide.
Right.
That's your job.
Yep. Definitely 100% agree. And it's just like one of those things where anybody that's trying to break into either of our businesses that might be afraid to talk to people and this and that. Like I said, it's one of those things where there's clients for everyone. There's people from all walks of life. Me personally, I like to be able to, I pride myself on being able to help all of those people. Because, part of what I do is figuring out what type of person I'm talking to and dealing with. And I think that's important for everybody. But for anybody trying to break into our respective fields that might be a little bit on the introverted side, there's a ton of success to be had for those people.
100%.
Because those people are out there and they want that person that's, sharing that same energy to connect with. So
cool. So we'll go back a little bit, right? So back to the Hollywood scene, right? How do you think creativity has evolved since you left Hollywood? I know you touched upon that a little bit with we didn't have the social media like we did back then. And more importantly, how do you think it's going to evolve into the future?
Yeah, man. Interesting question. Creativity for me is basically just, I'll have to kind of kick this story back a little ways, but just to kind of give some background. And I always like to preface this with not a pity party, right? I'm not the type of guy that really looks into getting any type of pity from anyone about my backstory, but it is a unique story. I feel everybody has their own story.
Sure.
It's very important that people know your story. So I won't dig too deep in this, but I'll give you just a glimpse. So single mom, grew up, very poor household, probably moved 18 something times by the time I moved out and got on my own. So it was like a year and a half average, basically almost before we'd be moving to a new location. So a lot of my childhood was adapt, change, figure out my surroundings,
readapt,
and then get ready because it was probably going to happen again in the near future. So paying my mom's rent when I was 14 years old for my mom, my two sisters. I just was man of the house very young, and kind of, so that also translates into what I'm doing today. Because, to answer your question, the Hollywood thing leading up to that, the creativity was dancing. I used to, win dance competitions in
Nice.
school. I was a huge.
Can we get some footage of that? You think about that?
I'm a huge hip hop guy and have been. Hip hop was basically my therapy. I would
Nice.
credit hip hop for
awesome.
guiding my younger life. That Nas album,
Yeah.
it was written a lot of times with Walkmans on city buses,
that's awesome.
traveling places, going to jobs, and hip hop was creatively, hip hop, saved a lot of what I feel, my younger years
Awesome.
by kind of guiding me and keeping me, focused on me and winning and, doing something with my life.
Yeah.
It was very motivational. So I found a lot of time, creatively. I used to write,
Yeah.
I used to rap, I used to
Awesome.
dance, all that stuff. And that's where kind of that Hollywood thing came into play. Nowadays, it's funny because, I'm into sports.
Yeah.
I love sports, played football with my son, basketball, video games.
Nice.
I don't like to say I'm one of those guys.
I was going to ask you how you escape, how do you escape from, the in and outs of day-to-day operations, but keep going.
Yeah, it's funny because, basically one of the things that I have as a result of my childhood is I'm very OCD. So everything's got to be super clean for me,
Right.
organized. I'm like assassin level detail.
That's awesome.
Everything's color coded. So, and that obviously translates good into
being sales.
into the field that I'm in.
Right.
Being organized and on top of details is important.
Sure.
So it's funny because everything, from my childhood, that OCD side of things is something I'm conscious of, but and it can be looked at as kind of a negative because it is a lot of work. I do have to clean probably more than most people.
Right.
I'm not to sit there and flip the switch on guy,
Yeah,
but
no.
I like things clean,
Yeah.
organized, neat,
Sure.
nice. And, part of me learning about my condition was basically, I went and sought help when I came back from Cali just to make sure everything
was okay.
was
Yeah.
right. So, being a younger guy, even then, I was like, so I went and talked to somebody. It was, a psychiatrist, and he's the one that told me, you have OCD. It's a product of how you were raised, and you had no control when you were a kid, and now when you're,
Right.
in your adult life, you want to control
Sure.
literally
Sure.
everything, and that is so me. But creatively, how I kind of like the outlet is video games, anything that allows me to flex that creativity.
Right.
Video games are very symmetric. They're
Right.
made perfect,
Yep.
so it's very aesthetically pleasing for me. It relaxes me. If I have a game where I can create something myself, even better, because now, I might disappear for a couple hours and that's where I'm letting out that energy because I still get to create something that I then get to share with the online world or
Right.
whatever. And it's something that, I created. So,
What games are you into?
love the story stuff, man.
Okay.
Anything, Assassin's Creed,
Yeah.
Uncharted, anything that's got a really good story.
Yeah.
The cinematics matter.
Yeah.
I'm not a big online talk crap gamer.
Well, yeah, come from Hollywood though.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
got to be important to when you see something because that's maybe not down the same Hollywood road, but it's still like a production. That's got to be important to you because you were in the industry.
Oh yeah,
So
100%.
that's
I pick apart video games just like I pick apart a movie.
I was gonna say a movie, yeah.
Writing's got to be good. Everything's got to
Right.
be pretty solid, or I'm not sold. But
What's the last good movie you saw?
last good movie I saw? Actually, believe it or not, man, it was something crazy, and it was so random. But it was the new Tom Hanks flick. I just watched last night with the missus. It's called Here.
Oh yeah.
So wild.
That's good.
It shows all the basically from the caveman days all the way up into now in the same neighborhood, same location, and then everything that's happened in that location since the Stone Age.
Right.
All
Wow.
the families that were born in the same street in the same neighborhood, and it was just one of those movies that really if I could sum it all up without giving anything away, kind of the premise of the movie is basically to just live in the moment. You stay sometimes growing up in the same house, around the same people, around the same everything, right? And it's never good enough. You always want something bigger, something better, a bigger house and all this other stuff. And you have all these dreams. And then it, not to give it away, but it basically comes down at the end where it's they're elderly in that same house that they couldn't wait to get out of years ago.
Right.
But now sitting in that house, having some of the happiest, most
Awesome.
best memories reflecting of their life, because you realize that's where I raised my kids. That's where grandma took her, had a birthday celebration. That's where, all these things start coming back to you. So it's really, I think the point of the movie I got out of it anyway was to live in the moment and to really just appreciate your background, your surroundings. And even if you want for bigger and better all the time, there's going to come a point in time in your life where that small little house that you started in is going to be like that thing that you like miss the most.
That's awesome. I'm watching Gladiator 2. And I say I'm watching it because I'm old, so I can't watch it all in one sitting. So I
wish you didn't bring that movie up.
I started it. Well, so it's controversial. It's controversial, and I was like, should we talk about it? Because it sounds like the general consensus doesn't like it. I think it's great, and again, I'm not like a crazy history buff, and I saw the first one, but I'm like, again, I'm gonna watch the second part tonight.
I'll give you a little fun tidbit. This is what ruined it for me. 3 words: wooden freedom stick.
Okay.
Do you remember in the first one it was called a Brutus?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's very symbolic, thing in gladiator culture, right? You got this Brutus when you were awarded your freedom.
Sure.
You go into a sequel and you call it a wooden freedom.
You don't call it what it's called. Yeah.
So
yeah.
It's like
I can see that.
So the script, again, going back to earlier, the script has to be good.
Right.
The biggest problem I have with Gladiator 2 is they threw a bunch of money at it. They threw a big budget.
That's what everyone.
The CGI and it's fantastic.
Correct.
The water scene, the sharks, there's all kinds of crazy stuff.
Don't give it away. I'm almost there.
Yeah. This is true. There's all kinds of crazy stuff that happens in that movie that they couldn't pull off in the first one. So I understand the CGI side.
And that's what it sounds like. I don't have to get too far off subject, but it sounds like the people, like the history buff people, are just outraged right now. They're like, this is garbage.
It feels like a copycat script. Feels very forced, pushed.
Right.
Ridley Scott, the original director, is much older now.
Right.
From what I heard behind the scenes, he's a very impatient person because he's much older now.
Yeah.
Doesn't have that same level of let's shoot the same scene 15 times to get it right. That didn't happen on Gladiator 2.
Really?
So to have that kind of, situation where it's kind of rushed even by the original director, but being so many years, 20-something plus years now, he's obviously far longer in age. He doesn't have that patience. So the general consensus from people behind the scenes was...
It was pushed out.
Just a rushed kind of,
Oh, that's too bad, man. Yeah. Well, hey, listen, I like it thus far, but I'll have to give you a recap when I end it. But I think that's the consensus is again, people that are history buffs are like, this is just not...
Yeah, you want good products.
Yeah.
I know what goes into making movies.
Right.
So when I see...
you pick it apart. I pick it apart. You should.
And I try not to, but the acting and the script writing, it really matters. And I think, just a last kind of thing on this is really in Hollywood, you're seeing a change of the guard, right? Yeah. A lot of the old-time directors that made all those awesome scripts, a lot of them are phasing out, getting older, retiring, whatever. So now you're kind of seeing this new generation of screenwriters come in and directors, and it's good as long as they just kind of understand that the biggest thing for movie buffs and people that really care about these movies and invest time and spend their money on them is they want to see a good product. Don't spend hundreds of $1 million and show me something that's the same as the last movie.
Well, you're not using the right verbiage.
Take some time, put some passion into it, because it really shows for the audience that are watching these things.
Right. We'll wrap up with this. What do you have for someone that's getting into, again, generic, right? Any sales role? What's some of the best advice you can give somebody?
Be yourself, man. That's honestly the biggest thing is just be yourself. Be authentic, be true. Everybody wants to be a superstar these days with all the social media stuff. Everybody wants to be the poppin' thing. And, at the end of the day, just be yourself. Yeah. If you really, truly just are yourself and you're authentic and you're real with people, like I was saying earlier, the realness thing is such a big thing, nowadays, because people just, they don't even look at CNN. Perfect example. Some of these news stations that are, dropping off the face of the planet, they're losing viewerships. Why? Because nobody believes them anymore.
Right.
Nobody wants to see you reading a teleprompter all the time of just a bunch of, stuff that was made for you to say.
Right.
They want you they want Al to be Al. They want Justin to be Justin.
Sure. 100%.
And if I could deliver anything, from this today of meaningful impact to maybe help some of the up and comers and rookies and people coming in to our respective fields, it's just be authentic and be yourself, Don't be afraid to show people some of your insecurities and some of your weaknesses. Nobody on this planet is perfect. As OCD, crazy, assassin, even I have to remind myself that I'm not perfect. I've definitely made mistakes. I've made a ton. And there's lots of things I'm not proud of, things I wish I could do differently. But at the end of the day, I just believe in myself as a it's all about evolution, man.
Yeah.
Just constantly trying to get better and level up from where you were last year, yesterday. My biggest competition, and this is a pretty well-known saying, but the person that you're in competition direct with every single day of your life is the person you were yesterday.
100% yourself, yeah.
So, you know what I'm saying? So if you can just level yourself up each time and just stay true to who you are, I think it really just connects with people. And I don't care what business you're in, whether you're a mechanic or salesman or insurance, if people trust you, they believe in you, and they know you're authentic and going to keep it real with them,
Yep.
it's just going to lead to more success in whatever field you're in.
100%.
So
it'd be hard pressed for me, right? So leaving the house today, I've been reading this book, right? And we talked before we came on about inner excellence, and I'm not getting like paid to promote this or anything. I just thought it was a good talking point. So yeah, the La Pointe Book Club is actually the new segment. No,
nice.
This book, right? So backstory, a few weeks ago, A.J. Brown of the Philadelphia Eagles was on the sidelines reading this book, like during this game. And they like interviewed him, and he's like, "Oh, I'm reading this book," and like instantly like Amazon bestseller, like overnight. So I'm like, hop on the bandwagon. So I bought it, read through about halfway through, but so moved by it, I got the audio book. So now like at night, I'm listening to that, and I'm not by any means a book guy. Years ago, but I have a kid now, so a little bit different,
Right.
Yeah, this book, like honestly, has just, it's like a million tiny little gems, and a lot of the stuff you might not take home with you, but some of the stuff is good. And this is like, as generic as it sounds, be yourself, but like here's why. Yeah, I had to bring it up because it was like,
Yeah, man.
I was like, this is,
I love the title already.
yeah, inner excellence, and it's one of those things where like, I think that's the thing, right? I think whatever role you're in, right, no matter what you're selling on the sales side, your authentic self is going to be the hardest thing to do sometimes. Like you're going to be pulled in a million different directions to not be yourself, but the more you can stick with that, the better you're going to be at whatever you're doing. And people will see right through that. I say it all the time. Like if you're not yourself, like someone's going to see through that, and they're just not going to like you or lose respect for you or just not trust you anymore. And that's your reputation, Right. That's, good point.
The cool part about, books like this is obviously it can have such an impact, just reading through it, right? But the cool part, to kind of go back to what we were saying earlier about the audios, the audio book side of things too, is anything like that anybody's getting into. We all wish we would like short circuit from the 80s, right? You go through the pages. And I know everybody's not going to get what that is. It's an 80s movie, but you could read a book in like 2 seconds.
Yeah.
We all wish we could have
movie,
that level, but at the end of the day, the audiobook is very similar.
Yeah. Well, because it sticks with you too. Like you get these things, like earlier, it's like, I have it on at night, and in the morning, I'm like, why am I repeating this phrase? Like, and it's like, oh, I had the book going before I
and then the
went to bed.
audiobooks, it's subconscious.
Yeah.
You'll be sitting there,
right.
You listen to it every night. I do books like this, like, and my warm up in the morning.
Yeah.
I'm having a coffee while I'm getting showered, dressed, whatever. I'm usually listening to some type of motivational, some expert in my field or something to kind of level me up. Because even if you don't think it's leveling you up, 2 weeks from now, you'll say something in a conversation that you learned from that day that you didn't even know you remembered.
Right.
It's pretty wild.
Crazy. Justin, this was awesome, man. Thanks for your time today. We talked about a lot. How can people reach you if they want to talk to you?
So I'm best reached by phone. I'm 7 days a week available for my people. You can reach me best at 401-626-2604. Okay. Email jmaroney@loandepot.com. Also, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And you'll find me usually as my nickname, Obi Lone Maroney.
I was gonna say, let's tap on the Instagram because you have a very special, unique Instagram handle, Obi Lone Maroney.
Yeah, man. So it's
you got to tell the story on it.
I got to tell the
story.
So I got into the business. One of the first things I noticed is some of the nicknames going around.
Right.
Definitely a little bit corny. You know what I mean? It's not really my thing to do that. But with so many, of course, in the business having one, I'm like, so I kind of played around with a few, and the Obi Lone Maroney, obviously a play on Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Right.
The precision, the lightsaber, the hope. It's Rhode Island, your only hope for excellence in service and communication.
Awesome.
It's definitely something that I run with, and I still have people out there obviously calling me by that name. So it's cool.
I call you by that name daily just because I like it.
Obi Loan, there's
Right.
worse things you can be called. So, but it was just, it's a fun little thing to throw out there to help the brand. And,
Love it.
It's fun, man.
Cool. Justin, this is awesome, man. Thanks again so much, dude.
Good having you.
Let's do this
Thanks
again.
so much for coming by.
And that's all we got. We're out.